I've told a version of my story quite a few times, but there was always filters and things I couldn't say in one way or another. I was asked to tell this story many months ago by Chad and Chris, but in true Justin form, I waited up until the last minute to really put it all together. Also, I was up most of last night with some pretty bad phantom pains. So, I didn't get a lot of sleep. Here we go.
You got it, boy.
I want to say this before saying the whole story. If things in this amputation story recovery journey went smoothly and weren't funny, I'd probably be depressed as shit or dead. There are many little mishaps, many I don't talk about today, that happened that really helped me find humor in a very serious story. So if something tickles you, laugh, please. That's how I've gotten through it. I often say I already had my master's in dark humor, but this whole thing earned me my doctorate. Some recurring themes you're going to hear are about anxiety and my quest to rid myself of it, and depression. This whole thing was, at the beginning, my journey to stop my anxiety. To start, I was a pretty annoying kid. Kind of strange and awkward. I mean, I'm still annoying, strange, and awkward as an adult, but it has a diagnosis. This all really started around the 4th or 5th grade, the anxiety and the big sad, that is. I had a great childhood. Wonderful parents, even though I never got the USS flag. It's okay, Dad. I only say it because 95% of my generation like to say it. I had wonderful parents. Mom was a special educator and Dad the director of HR for a bank. I credit my father for my love of music, odd facts, antiques, and so many things. He has been the best father I could have ever asked for. Of course, he plays a big role in my life, but especially toward the end of the story, it gets a little difficult and becomes a different type of relationship. My mom was always my safe place. I'd go to her when I was overwhelmed, had troubles, and later who I spoke to about my mental health struggles. Mom had dealt with bad anxiety and so on quite a bit as well. I could stand up here, sit up here and gush about Mom and Dad and Becky for hours, but Chad told me only up to an hour and 15 minutes. Sorry to disappoint y'all. Starting in the 4th grade, just after the death of my maternal grandmother and our move to Kentucky, I realized I was really sad and didn't really have a lot in common with my peers. I felt very out of place and had this strange feeling in my chest like I had done something wrong, but I didn't know why or what it was. By the 5th grade, I had stopped consuming any caffeine and was doing my best to sleep at night. Around the 7th grade, I knew I wasn't quite like the kids in my class and the kids in my school, and I didn't understand it. By my freshman year, I knew I wasn't ever really going to fit in, so I accepted it. I had my first real relationship, starting the summer before my junior year of high school. Things went smooth at first, but like we'll see throughout this story, that all changed. In March, again, this is common, of 2001, she had what was thought of at first a heart attack in the shower. But later, at the hospital, she was diagnosed with very bad anxiety and later OCD. I became a ritual, added to all the others. My senior year was very difficult, but during this time, I made a few friendships that continue to this day. That relationship fell apart around the time I graduated high school, but I had learned during this whole process that I need to stand up for myself and also that I too was dealing with a lot of anxiety. I had begun seeing a psychiatrist when I was 16 or 15 for depression, anxiety, and for my attention deficit disorder. No matter what, I was still dealing with a lot of anxiety. Toward the end of my senior year, I became an Eagle Scout. Thanks, Dad. This is one of the things of which I'm most proud. I had a very small friend group. There were 4 of us who are still very tight to this day and speak almost daily. All 3 were very important to me. I actually officiated one's wedding and would probably take a bullet for any of them. I started at a community college. I started at a community college and was really enjoying the new freedom and was doing quite well. Made some new friends and was introduced to a lot of new things, one of which were regulars, like the painkillers that had acetaminophen in them. I learned a few years before, when I'd had a double knee surgery, that my anxiety went away when I took my medicine for my surgeries. I was around people who had them pretty regularly. It wasn't a habit yet, just something I did every once in a while. Around 22, I started drinking, and like many people who I've heard speaking in many meetings all these past 6 years, it allowed me a bit of social lubrication so you didn't feel quite so awkward. Around this time, my best friend Travis and the two others graduated. It was an amazing summer, lots of fun. I left home and went to the University of Kentucky, and I did pretty well the first 2 semesters. But by the third, I was drinking entirely too much and spending too much time doing things other than school. I left that semester and moved home. Around this time, I had some close friends whose parents always had those pills, and they were very liberal giving them out. They were always available, and I rarely had to purchase anything. About this time also, I started at a local college and was doing well in my first semester. By this point, my psychiatrist had me on an antipsychotic and mood stabilizer in addition to my other medications. By now, my maternal grandfather had been doing very badly health-wise. I'd always been very close to him, and still to this day look at him like a hero. The thought of losing Gramps terrified me. So many of my qualities came from him through my mother. Around February 2007 was the last time I saw my grandfather in pretty good health. They had come to town because everyone was going to Indiana for my niece's birth. I'd like to take a moment right now. What I'm going to talk about should not scare you away from psychiatric treatment. Just always make sure, if you're on a medication that you need to get blood work with, that your doctor makes sure you have the blood work. In March 2007, I began developing what I would be told by an ER doctor was early Stevens-Johnson's disorder. I had a subdermal rash on my torso, and I had blisters in my mouth, and slowly I was losing my connection with reality. My girlfriend at the time kept urging me to go to the doctor about my rash and other symptoms. When I showed up to take a computer science exam, my professor stopped me at the door, concerned while I was carrying a gallon of water, sweating profusely, and I'm sure I looked just awful. He said he would give me credit for the exam. I just had to promise him I would go to the ER. I did that, and what followed the next couple hours is kind of serious. There wasn't a medication that could be given to stop it, only IV fluids and sedatives. I left the hospital against medical advice and went home, not before stopping and buying some whiskey and a lot of pills. Later on in 2007, I got a DUI and lost my license. This made my life a little more difficult, and I was so ashamed and very embarrassed. In 2008, I began a tattoo apprenticeship at a shop not far from my house, and it was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Not necessarily good things, but it was wonderful times. I worked with this artist until 2010. We closed the shop. My drug use had continued, of course, throughout all this time. But in 2009, I used drugs intravenously for the first time. I felt as though I found the answer to my problems. Not long after, I was addicted to the same medication that had been promoted by pharmaceutical companies and drug reps in my area. As we found out many years later, it was designed to be sold to people in Central Appalachia. Because of the coal mines and all the injuries in and related to the industry. OxyContin could be found everywhere in my hometown and in all the towns and counties surrounding it. Heroin, which I preferred, was much harder to find, but I had a connection who lived in Louisville, but I only saw him every once in a while. Mom, Dad, and I had been going to doctors and specialists for years trying to find out what was causing all of my mother's symptoms. Finally, after many years, we found out my mother had an ultra-rare debilitating autoimmune disorder called CREST. I can't remember all the words that make up CREST, but it sucked very bad. There's only a couple case studies able to be found in medical journals and books. And there's only one actual case study of this disorder, and I believe it came from a man in India in the early 1900s. So now, in addition to my normal anxieties, I'm worried about what's going to happen to my mother. Take a break real fast, sorry. Don't worry, the amusing part's coming. But Mom continued to work all of this time, and again, such a hero of mine. She stayed at her job, being both the director of special education for Floyd County, Kentucky, but also the director of the Head Start program. I really think that her children and students are what kept her going for so very long. She sadly had to retire around this time. In 2010, after a few hospital stays beforehand, my mom had to go to Johns Hopkins University to have a very delicate procedure done on her spine. The procedure did not go as planned, and in the process of fusing some of her vertebrae, they crushed her larynx. In retrospect, I feel this was the beginning of the end of my mommy. She had to have a feeding tube from this point forward, and it was so hard for her to even drink water. A year or so later, after Mom's caregiver, Nadine, had to quit to take care of her father, my dad approached me and asked me if I would mind being Mother's caregiver. Absolutely zero hesitation. I was just like, of course, she's my mommy. So during the last few years she was alive, my mother and I got to know each other, not just as mother and son, but really got to know her as a person. I learned so many things that I had never known about my mom in the time that we just sat and watched Gunsmoke, Bonanza, and all the other shows she loved. My world fell apart on October 5th, 2013. My mommy died. I'm not going to expand on this much. I should have understood it was coming, but I had developed a routine with her, and I didn't let death cross my mind at the time. I've never handled emotions well like most people. At this point, I truly hit the fuck it button. In the previous year, I had made friends with a local nurse who would give me ampules of a couple different opiates, and she really just enjoyed watching the process of IV drug use. In the end, I moved back here in early 2014. My father, unaware of how bad the hell I had already created for myself was, purchased a house for me and set me up for absolute success. I had met someone a few months earlier, and she and her child came here a little later. This was, again, in March. I should have known better. We were both IV users, and things weren't ever really that good. But we had a place to live, and soon had jobs that allowed for the support of our unquenchable addictions. After something very serious happened, I had to ask them to please leave. At this point, I didn't know why I was still here. I was lost and just going through the motions like a robot. I'd been using cocaine for a few months, and after all this happened, I really started to use quite a bit. I would go to work, make money at the bar, call my dealer I'll pick it up from them, or it would be dropped off at my house. And this is what leads us to the story everybody always asks about. July 18th, 2018. I had worked my normal shift on a Saturday night and done my normal rounds to the different dealers and come home and did what I always did. Drink a few beers, inject drugs, and play video games. At some point on Sunday, while using substances, I lost consciousness. I have no real memory of any of the days beforehand. On Wednesday, July 18th, something was able to bring me out of my almost dead state. It was my father banging on my front door. I don't know if you all can look at him. He looks very kind right now, but when he's upset, he's upset. I tried to stand up off the couch, and every time I stood, I just collapsed. I would scatter beer bottles everywhere with each fall, and whatever trash was there across the floor. Again and again, I would try to stand up and walk, but would collapse every time I took a step. Even in my mostly dead state, the feeling of the particulate on the hardwood floor sticking to my body was excruciating. It was the worst feeling that I've ever felt. When I finally mustered the ability to stand up and unlock the door, I just collapsed again. My dad softened my fall with his leg, and I only remember how hot it was outside and him saying to Becky, "Should I call 911?" And her replying in her wonderful Midwest accent, "You think?" The first person to respond was a man that I had known for years and years, Officer Jamie Dowell. He kept giving me a sternum rub and asking me, "What did he take, buddy?" over and over and over. And this is about the time I'd really lose consciousness. I was apparently Narcan twice. I learned a few years earlier that I had an allergy to naloxone when trying to use a MAP medication to try to get off other drugs. I remember snapshots and snippets on the ambulance ride. One where I had Becky's ring on my finger, looking at it, admiring it, how pretty it was. Just, she's probably actually wearing it right now. It's the Yggdrasil or the Tree of Life, and it, like, you know when you see somebody in a movie find a treasure, how there's that shine around it. Like, I was just riding, just like, oh my god, just so beautiful. Oh no. Hold on, sorry y'all.
You're good.
Like I said, I really should have heard this all. The next thing I really remember is being pushed and pulled and jostled around and kept being put on really uncomfortable metal tables. I had a central line inserted into my neck, and apparently I had to be loosely restrained because I was fighting anyone and everyone who got near me. I also kept messing with the material that they put over the central line. It felt like wax. It was so fun. Like, you could just squeeze it and then move it into place, and I just kept, like, hand swats. Stop touching it. So I woke up twice during my surgeries. Once I saw the orthopedic surgeon with a saw, and I saw my knee suspended in the air. At that point, my brain decided, I think it's time to check out. I have many memories of the surgeries. They are all about 25% real, and the rest occurred in a very ethereal place. I can't get into that here. R3 would probably be closed by the time I finish talking. The first time I woke up, I simply asked for my mom. This memory keeps being buried by my psyche. It is honestly upsetting when I talk about it. The next time I woke up, keep in mind I'm still intubated. So words are so... I really needed to pee. Like, so bad. And Father's like, "Justin, just relax. You have a Foley catheter." And I would relax, and there was no relief. After many back and forths with my father, while I was still, intubated, the nurse took me to another procedure room, threw me on a cold metal table, and they deflated the catheter, and I began urinating an arch that the nurse very skillfully caught with a urinal. I then filled 2 more and was taken back to my room. I later realized that was well over 70 ounces of fluid. My next wake up is when I told Becky that my leg felt weird. And this is probably my favorite part of the early hospital story. I told Becky my leg just felt funny, like it was tingling and all sorts of stuff. And she said, in that very soft accent, they had to take it. And I replied, "Well, when are they bringing it back?" She put her hand over her heart and said in that sweet Midwest accent, "Oh no, they had to amputate it." I think it sunk in at that moment that I didn't have a leg. Like, most amputees try to get up and walk after they've had a leg removed. And they'll fall and land on it. It happened to the guy across from me in the hospital. Like, I heard him, like his chair alarm went off, and he tried to take a step, and then what followed was one of the worst sounds I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. Soon after really regaining consciousness, the severity of what I had done to myself through all the years of running from feelings was told to me. I had to have 2 heart surgeries, technically 2 amputations. My heart wasn't strong enough to pump blood past my knee. I had 2 strokes, some seizures, and had 2 aneurysms, which were mirror images of each other on each side of the brain. I actually got to see them during an angioarteriogram, and I kept getting in trouble because I was just trying to look over at the screen to see what my brain looked like, because they put all the reactive dye in you, so like you can actually see like all the vessels in your brain. And this dude just keeps saying, stop moving. I'm like, I'm not moving. He's like, every time you talk or move your eyes, it messes with this. And I was like, okay. And I tried to just settle my eyes over like that, but it didn't work. At first, they thought I would have to be on dialysis for the rest of my life. Luckily, that didn't happen. After a pretty eventful time in Winston and some experiences that were easily the most humbling things I've ever had to go through, I was moved back to Wilkes to the skilled nursing floor of our hospital. This is when I met a lot of wonderful people who hold very, very dear places in my heart to this day. During this time is also when I encountered Recovery Revolution, or Wilkes Recovery Revolution as it was known then. A few times, the director of therapy services would come to my room and talk to me. She told me about an upcoming event that they were having. She told me the story of Devin Lyle, her daughter. Becky took me to the for my first recovery rally. It was so new to me. That guy was playing music. Ricky. Yeah.
Ricky looking around like
This is also the night Walker proposed to Devin, who I met just after arriving. Donna had planted the first of a couple seeds in my brain about a different life. After many months, I was finally released. Dad, Becky, and I had some stuff to do before I went to my new home. We had to find a walker and do something else that I really can't remember, and decided we were going to get some lunch. So Father said, let's go to the Old Brain Drug. And I was like, what? He was like, it's a restaurant. So it was here at the dispensary that the second of those seeds was planted. The proprietor of this restaurant was speaking to us and relating that his father was also an amputee. We had wonderful food and a few drinks. When I had to use the restroom, which now happened way more often than it used to, and not as cleanly, Brad got the story about me from Dad and Becky. Upon my return, Brad handed me his business card, and in that cocky way we all know and love, said, you'll know when to call me. Mm-hmm. That card stayed in my wallet for a couple of years. I moved to my grandmother's house, where a family member who I had never really gotten along with would be in charge of my care. Things were always tense when she was there or on her way. But I had a great time being with my darling grandmother. Granny had dementia. I'm just going to add this story because my dad didn't know it. So Granny was the sweetest woman. I mean, she raised 4 unruly children, so she had a mean side. But like, I'd always known Granny as just a sweet lady that could make anything, any food. It was just great. She made her own root beer, and it was phenomenal. So one time, not long after I moved in, and please keep in mind I can't really walk yet. So I'm walking on my learner leg with my walker, and the caregiver can't get Granny to come off the toilet. If Granny decided she didn't want to go somewhere, Granny was just going to be there. So she called for me, and I walk in there like, how am I going to do this? I can't even put weight on my leg. And so I tried to pick Granny up, and in a very sneaky move, planted a right hook on my chin that rocked my world. I had never been hit that hard by a man in my life. She had really big knuckles. After finally getting better at walking and finally getting my license back, I got a job and felt a little more confident and relaxed. I still hated coming back to Granny's house because I never knew what to expect. I had been verbally and emotionally battered for over a year, and I was also made to feel less than by her. She constantly brought up what I had done and also always making me feel bad or guilty. Once I spilled a tumbler of coffee on my bed, and she informed my father that I wasn't showering, and that's what the big brown stain was. I felt so fed up and tired of always feeling on edge every day. Something really had to change. Well, at my job, I met somebody who had a different type of drug than I enjoyed, but still had a bit of an escape. That's when my relapse happened. The result was my being kicked out of Granny's house, and I was also told not to contact my family until I was clean and sober. I was informed I had to leave at night, but I was able to stay till the next morning to gather my few belongings I had left. Also, I still had to launder my clothes, so I was allowed to stay that night, so I can pack everything up. Sorry, I said that twice. I had no clue who to turn to and where to go. For the first time in my life, I was 100% alone. I called the only person I could think of, Kayla. She had been one of Granny's caregivers who had been run off by the toxic venom of the same person I had to endure. I had spent some weekends with her and her husband, so I called her. I stayed with Kayla and her husband, Muffin, for a couple of months until I couldn't. That's when I moved into a dilapidated camper in my coworker's backyard. I was there for about 5 months. Then, one day, in early April, it was already like in the 90s that year, I was sitting in that sweltering camper that rarely had running water. There was no air conditioning, and I decided, well, I guess this is it. I really shit the bed. It's time to move forward. So I needed a change. Not long after that, I was evicted and taken to the homeless shelter by my coworker's boyfriend. I had never been in a situation like this. My emotions were everywhere. I had to spend all day in town with nowhere to go. After hanging out with other people from the shelter in the woods during the day for a couple of times, I was broken. I sat inside a cluster of trees with my backpack holding everything I had left for 2 hot, sticky, and exhausting days. My mind drifted down a very, very dark path. This was a road I hadn't been down since 2007. I was considering suicide again, but I didn't. After staying at the shelter for a little bit of time, Derek and I had spoken about phases, and he contacted Walker to try to get me a bed. This was during the height of COVID in 2020. My hopes weren't high, honestly. I hadn't gotten good news in God knows how many months. And I was just exhausted. I had no clue what to do. And there wasn't a center like this quite yet. It was a few months away, but not quite. A few days after Derek, after a few days, I was told by Derek that Jeff Walker accepted my application. I was thinking, holy shit, is something really positive actually happening? I was so pumped. I was terrified, but I was super excited. In 2000, oh damn it, I'm sorry you all. I even practiced this.
You're good, bro. It's all good. It's all great, baby.
Okay. Walker picked me up one evening from the shelter and drove me to Phases. I was so unbelievably nervous, anxious, every word you can think of, it was happening. And I also had a little spark of hope. And I just wanted something positive to happen in my life. Walker picked me up one evening from the shelter. Oh, I already said that, sorry. So I went to Phases at the end of June in 2020. I got a job at Applebee's for quite a while where I met some wonderful friends and also reconnected with a few from before and had some great times. I began working the steps with my sponsor, George. I was very serious and took what I was told seriously. I never wanted to end up in a situation like what had happened a few months ago again, nor did I want to be dependent on a substance ever again. I learned so many things and so many lessons during these months and years. Those things I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I think because I was the only other person at Phases that had a valid driver's license, I was asked to start helping Cyrus with transportation. So he could get some time off, like it was always busy. So in August or September, Walker spoke to me about a possible position at the new R3 Recovery Center. I'll basically be driving people to aid in their recovery. I jumped at the chance. This is when I met Gladys, the E350 transit van. I could talk forever about the workhorse that was Gladys. We drove so many people to treatment, detox, doctor's appointment, courthouses, and so many other places. I really was loving not only my job, but I was loving myself again. At the beginning of 2021, I moved in with one of my coworkers and I left Phases. It was nice living what I now considered, what I now understood, a normal life. Chad and I had a great time together. He really helped out with building my self-esteem back a little. This is when I contacted my father for the first time since 2019. I wanted to tell him about my 1-year chip, thanks Mr. George, and give it to him. Our relationship was slowly starting to develop again. I wanted that more than anything else, honestly. I recall the first time I saw him and Becky when they came to our Armory Road apartment to take me out to breakfast. Something we used to do quite frequently in the past. Yes, it was a little tense and awkward. I really hoped that would go away soon. Not long after this, I met the person who later would become my person. My person I will be with for the rest of my life. She bebopped across the parking lot and into my heart. I was smitten. That was it. I knew I'd found her. We still are planning on eating Thai food at some point. And most of the time, that's where one of these stories would end. Like, everybody's all happy, we're having a great time, we're in recovery, and things are great. A wonderful song like Dreaming by Blondie would play in the background, and it would be happily ever after. But if you'll remember, my mental health is basically the focus of this whole troubled journey. So after re-engaging with a psychiatrist for a few years, in May of 2025, I developed another very rare disorder. This one was called serotonin syndrome. Eric and I had gone to Greensboro for a Pinewood Derby, Kentucky Derby party. The Friday we were going to leave, I had been feeling a little off and sweating much more than usual. When driving, my eyes were doing weird things and I could not calm my anxiety down. After we got to the hotel, we were waiting for an Uber to pick us up, and I had a horrible panic attack. I had never had a panic attack in front of Erica. We gathered our stuff and headed to Travis's house. When we got inside, I was trying to change into my nicer clothes for the party, and my sweating increased as well as my anxiety. The party was so fun, and all the races with all the cars, it was great. That night, I soaked our hotel bed with sweat, and as we were about to head home, I had another horrible panic attack. We finally arrived at home, and I crashed out. After Derby weekend, or the weekend of May 5th, 2025, I decided I should just go back to work and I'd be fine. Not true. After a very rough and sweaty day at work, Erica took me to the hospital that night. After a few hours, it was begrudgingly confirmed that I had serotonin syndrome. The only symptoms that I was not exhibiting were seizures and death. This meant I had to stop all of my medicines. And I had to take leave of absence from the job that I love to do. My doctor put me on strong sedatives, and I basically sat on the couch and stared at the TV. I had the craziest mood swings and episodes I've ever had. Like, I'd just be talking to Erica and Landon, and then all of a sudden, I'd just start crying, and it'd go away, like, 2 minutes later, and I'd just be over the moon happy. Like, it was, I've never experienced anything like it. I don't recommend. So now, we have dealt with a few things as a couple, and life is smooth. Just kidding. After being off work for about a month with all the side effects of coming off all my medications, and all the serious complications that could have happened, I came back to work. That was June 2nd, last year. The next day, on June 3rd, I was pulling out of the women's house driveway and was hit very hard by an Infiniti. That was the end of Gladys, my wonderful E350 Transit van. After a couple summer months in a black van without air conditioning, R3 had a new van, a wonderful Honda Odyssey named Sally. This van had a place that keeps my lemon lime seltzer water cold and had so many bells and whistles, I was in heaven. I need to take this time to recognize my coworkers. You all have put up with me longer than any of my elementary school teachers had to. A week ago today, I began a new journey doing the transportation for Cameron Ridge Treatment Center. I'm excited for the things that are to come. I'm also in another E350 Transit van. I feel the name Irma coming from this one. There are so many people that I need to thank involved in my story. A lot of people weren't really talked about. Travis, Nick, and Mullet, thank you for supporting me when I didn't deserve to have such amazing friends. Definitely Walker and Devin, thank you for all this for this whole amazing organization and all it does. And I want to say thank you to Rachel Pants. You and your mother Sunny's love helped me through the worst days of my life. And Erica, thank you for putting up with me. Period. I love what I've been doing for the past 6 years so very much, and I hope to continue to do it until I'm too old to safely drive a large white van.
Let's go.
To wrap this train wreck up and bring this to a close, I love what I do. Some days are rough, but I do this because I want to help people who are where I once was. I just want to see people get it and do well. Thanks for listening to my meandering story.
Bravo. Woo!